The medical examiner determined that Lori's death was caused, quote, by homicidal violence with evidence of strangulation or trauma to the soft tissue of her neck, and that she was killed prior to the setting of the fire that caused severe thermal burns to over 90% of her body. The front desk clerk encountered the victim and the defendant in the lobby just prior to 9 p.m. the previous night, after informing the victim that an additional charge of almost 3 times the rental room amount would be added to her room for violating a smoking ban and a burn hole or damage to the bed sheets. Lori appeared upset at the defendant and left him in the lobby. After leaving the lobby, the defendant returned and paid for a room in his own name, room 105. Guests reported hearing a loud argument between a male and female around 12:30 a.m. and loud bangs between 5:15 and 5:30 a.m. before smelling smoke. A security officer reported that a male matching the defendant's description came to the lobby before 5:30 a.m. asking for a key to room 145, which was Lori's room. Shortly thereafter, the officer heard a loud pop and left the lobby to see the same man, this defendant, standing at the door to room 145 with smoke coming from the broken window. When the officer asked what happened, the defendant pulled the door shut and headed to the parking lot where he fled in Lori's SUV. The investigation revealed the defendant drove Lori's SUV to Lori's house to look for money and or his cell phone. Lori's husband, Joel, told police he recalled seeing his wife's SUV and thought his wife was driving. The defendant was stopped by Banks County, Georgia, law enforcement officials driving Lori's SUV in an erratic manner. During an exchange with police, the defendant became aggressive, shouted obscenities, and struck multiple officers with closed fists during his arrest. In an interview with Greenville County Sheriff's Office investigator Laura Jones, while in Banks County, Georgia custody, the defendant admitted to becoming extremely angry with Lori while they were at the motel in Lori's room, though he does not indicate why they were in her room and not his, and then falling asleep as Lori left. The defendant said he awoke when Lori came back to her room and became enraged at her because she, quote, knew not to come back to that room, end quote. According to the defendant, Lori, quote, knew she was going to die that night. He then told investigator Jones he strangled Lori and she wouldn't die, so he set her on fire. The defendant left after setting fire to Lori, but appeared to be baffled that the room did not burn entirely, though there was extensive fire damage to the room. He admitted returning to the room, breaking the window to enter, and finding Lori badly burned. The defendant said he stole Lori's SUV and drove to the Bilo on Woodruff Road to get something to eat. He then went to Lori's home, but her husband and children were awake, so he headed to Atlanta. The defendant indicated his relationship with Lori had been going on for a couple of months. The defendant denied her hearing any voices at the time he killed Lori, but said he flew into a rage since she knew not to come back to the room. He told investigator Jones that Lori told him she loved him as he was strangling her and then screamed for help, but nobody helped her. The defendant told Jones he knocked the smoke alarm off the wall and wrapped Lori's head and feet in a sheet, to which he then set fire. Your Honor, present in the courtroom today, of course, is the victim's family. Also, Captain Shane Prescrave, that I'll ask to stand, from Banks County, Georgia. He was instrumental in the capture of the defendant right after the incident. Also, Sergeant Chris Cooper with the Greenville County Sheriff's Office Homicide Division. His unit was responsible for the investigation. Your Honor, Lori's mother is here, her sisters are here, and her family filled the first couple of rows. Her sister, Mandy Evans, has a statement that she'd like to read to the court at the appropriate time.
Certainly. Just one moment. Sir, to this charge of murder in the indictment, how do you plead? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
I'm going to accept your plea as being freely and voluntarily made with the advice of extremely competent counsel with whom you say you're well satisfied, and the plea does have a substantial factual basis. I certainly will hear from the victim's family if anyone would like to speak, and then I'm going to turn to the defense to prove by preponderance of the evidence that he suffered from a mental defect.
And just before Ms. Evans speaks, I will point out to the court that the defendant has been in custody for 793 days. And the negotiation between the state and the defense is for a sentence of 31 years.
793 days?
Yes, ma'am.
misfortune of the result of a bad choice with no take-backs. It's a loss of great magnitude for our family. Physically, we are forced to move on. Emotionally, we are perpetually stuck on March 3rd, 2014. Laurie was amazing. She was a 103-pound ball of energy. Acceptance, dependability, love, comfort, worry, humor, and consistency. She had such an ease about her. Laurie was a constant in our lives. She wasn't a malicious person. She didn't hold grudges. She insisted on giving people the benefit of the doubt and absolutely refused to believe that people were so bad that they didn't have some good in them. Laurie truly felt that people would be kind to you as long as you were kind to them. She believed this to a fault. Laurie was a worrier who tried very hard not to worry. She was the most responsible person, always trying to make the best choices in fear of the repercussions if she didn't. The brutality and the irony of how Laurie's life ended is absolutely terrifying. Laurie was an advocate for anyone that she felt had been wronged or simply dealt a bad hand in life. She met needs for others. She would buy Christmas gifts for students that Santa couldn't visit. She bought coats for students, groceries for families that needed them. And she had been known to hunt students down that laid out of school. Why? Because it mattered to her. Her students mattered to her. It mattered to Laurie that someone noticed them, that someone cared about them, and that good things could happen to them, even in the most dismal of circumstances. Two of Laurie's biggest fears in life was to turn 40 and to pass away and leave her children at a young age. The thought of turning 40 to Laurie was completely inevitable, but I know that she was completely blindsided by the heinous acts of that day that resulted in her permanently leaving her children. I can't imagine the terror that Laurie felt as she fought for her life when the realization and the finality of the situation set in. We, her sisters, her mom and dad, nieces, nephews, cousins, students, co-workers, friends, and neighbors have been devastated by this tragedy. The two who've been affected the most are Laurie's babies. Darrin was 6 when she was killed. Lula was 3. They have been victimized the most. To hear them pray to have Laurie back. To watch Lula fall on Laurie's grave, begging for her mom. To try to dampen their fits of frustration from not seeing their mommy and not understanding where their mommy really is. Trying to console their grieving little hearts, to soothe their aching and their longing has been gut-wrenching. I can continue listing Laurie's attributes and the voids that have been left behind, but I won't. It's also bittersweet to talk about, and it's a place that I could stay forever, but I can't. Life is still happening around me, and it's so hard to jump back into. We are very thankful that we have some answers. Thankful that we aren't one of the unfortunate families whose loved one is just missing. We are thankful that no one else at the motel was hurt. We are thankful for Greenville County deputies, detectives, firemen, and EMTs who responded to the scene that morning. We are thankful for the Banks County, Georgia Police Department as well. Sheriff's Department as well. I thought today would feel different to me, but it doesn't. It feels the same as all of the other days since March 3rd, 2014. Devoid of her. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, ma'am. And I'm so sorry for you and your family's loss. It's evident here today from in the courtroom, all the people here in support, how beloved she was, and I don't know that I've ever heard a more eloquent statement in court. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anything else you can say?
Just for the court's information, the defendant's only prior records, the 2014 charge was assault.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor. You've already heard a little bit about Mr. Eskew's mental health issues. We are seeking to enter this plea today as guilty but mentally ill. To that end, it's the defense burden to prove beyond a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Eskew was affected by a mental defect such that he lacked the capacity to conform his conduct to the requirements of the law. To that end, I have two exhibits to introduce to the court. These are evaluations done by Dr. William Mulberry out of Charleston. He's met with Mr. Eskew many times over the last couple of years and has put these reports together opining as to his criminal responsibility and capacity to conform. The state has reviewed all of this stuff, and that being said, I'm just going to introduce these as Defense Exhibit 1 and 2.
Any objection from the state?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Anything else from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Well, I do find that the defense has established by preponderance of the evidence that the defendant suffered from mental illness of schizophrenia, and that although he had the capacity to distinguish right from wrong and to recognize his act as being wrong at the time, because of that mental disease or defect, he lacked sufficient capacity to conform his conduct to the requirements of the law. Therefore, I do find him guilty but mentally ill as to the charge of murder. The sentence of the court is 31 years, credit for 793 days time served.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good luck, Mr. Hall. Thank you.